Promises under starlight. The salty breeze carried whispers across Meyerbrook as Amara Whitewood ran barefoot along the shoreline, her auburn hair catching the last golden rays of sunset. Behind her Elliot, Blackwood followed with measured steps, the way he always did, careful and deliberate where she was impulsive and free. "You'll never catch me at this rate," she called over her shoulder, her laughter mingling with the crash of waves against ancient stones. "Perhaps I enjoy watching you run," he replied, his voice low enough that only the wind and she could hear it. They had grown up together in this village where fishing boats dotted the harbor and everyone knew everyone's business. 18 summers had passed for them, both their lives, intertwined like the ivy that climbed the stone walls of Brother Matthias's chapel. When Amara finally slowed, allowing Elliot to catch her, his arms encircled her waist, pulling her close against him. She felt the steady rhythm of his heart, a counterpoint to her racing pulse. "I have something for you," he murmured against her ear, his breath warm against her skin. From his pocket he produced a delicate silver ring adorned with a single pearl. "It was my grandmother's," he explained as Amara's eyes widened. "A promise that when I return from my season at sea we'll be married properly." Amara took the ring with trembling fingers, sliding it onto her hand. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. 3 months will feel like forever. The sea can't keep me from you." Elliot pressed his forehead against hers. Nothing ever could. What neither noticed was the figure watching from the dunes. Daphne Everhart stood motionless, her honey blonde hair whipping around her face as she observed the exchange. Her green eyes narrowed slightly, the smile she wore never quite reaching them. Daphne had been Amara's friend since childhood, but friendship had grown complicated over the years, particularly when it came to Elliot later. That evening, as villagers gathered in the town square for the harvest festival, Brother Matthias moved among them, offering blessings and gentle wisdom. His weathered face creased with a smile when he spotted Amara showing her ring to the other. "Young women, a blessing on your betrothal," he said, approaching the couple. "May the tides bring you safely back to each other." Daphne appeared at Amara's side, clutching her hand. "Let me see it again," she insisted, examining the pearl ring. "How beautiful. What luck you have always." Something in her tone made Brother Matthias glance sharply at her, though no one else seemed to notice. As music filled the square, Elliot pulled Amara into a dance, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. Nearby, Daphne watched, sipping slowly from her cup, her mind turning over possibilities and plans. She had always believed Elliot belonged with her, not with dreamy, impractical Amara, and now with his departure for the dangerous fishing grounds approaching, she saw opportunity where others might see tragedy. "You'll write to me every day," Amara whispered against Elliot's chest as they swayed to the music. "Every moment I can," he promised, kissing the top of her head. "And when I return, we'll build that cottage on the cliffs, the one we've talked about since we were children." Under the glow of lanterns and stars, they sealed their promise with a kiss, unaware that fate had already begun weaving a darker pattern, one that would test the very foundations of their love. As the night deepened, Brother Matthias observed Daphne slip away from the celebration, following the path toward the harbor. His eyes narrowed with concern, something about her determined stride troubling him. But soon the music called him back to the festivities, and the moment passed forgotten in the joy of celebration. The tempest's claim. The storm arrived without warning, sweeping across Meyerbrook with a fury that sent fishing boats scrambling for harbor. Elliot's vessel, the Seafarer, was among the last to return, fighting against waves that rose like mountains. Against the darkening sky, Amara stood on the cliffs, her cloak whipping violently around her as rain pelted her face. "They'll make it," Daphne said, appearing beside her friend, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Elliot knows these waters better than anyone." But something in Daphne's expression didn't match her reassuring words, a certain distance in her eyes that Amara might have noticed had she not been so focused on the struggling ship below. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the chaos in the harbor. For one terrible moment, Amara saw the Seafarer list dangerously as a massive wave struck its side. Then darkness swallowed everything again. "No," she whispered, her hands clutching the pearl ring at her throat. Please no. When dawn finally broke. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake. 3 fishing boats had been lost to the tempest's rage, the seafarer among them. 4 bodies had washed ashore, but Elliot wasn't among them. The sea had claimed him without, even granting the mercy of returning his body for proper burial. The village mourned their lost sons, but none grieved like Amara. She became a ghost herself, moving through the days in silence. Her vibrant spirit dimmed to nothing more than a flicker. Brother Matthias arranged a memorial service, though without bodies the graves remained empty. Symbolic markers for those the village had lost. Each morning Amara would visit the stone that bore Elliot's name, placing wildflowers upon it, whispering words only he would understand. Sometimes she would simply sit there for hours, her fingers tracing the letters carved into cold stone. You shouldn't torture yourself this way, Daphne told her one morning, appearing at the cemetery with her own small bouquet. Elliot wouldn't want this. How do you know what he would want? Amara replied, her voice hoarse from disuse. He promised to come back to me. How am I supposed to accept that he never will? Daphne knelt beside her, taking her hands. Life continues, Amara, even after loss. Even after heartbreak, we must continue with it. What Amara couldn't see was the satisfaction hidden behind Daphne's sympathetic expression. The plan had worked perfectly. The small hole drilled into the hull of the seafarer, just large enough to slowly take on water during a storm. The whisper to the captain suggesting they take the eastern route where the storm would hit hardest. Simple acts with devastating consequences. Brother Matthias observed the 2 women from the chapel doorway, his brow furrowed. Something about the tragedy had never settled right with him. Fishermen from a neighboring village had reported seeing a figure at the docks the night before. The seafarer sailed, a woman with honey-blonde hair, inspecting the boats in the moonlight. One evening, as Amara sat by the memorial stone weeping, Brother Matthias approached, sitting beside her in silence for several minutes. There are whispers in the village, he finally said, his voice gentle. One of the boats found something strange. The seafarer didn't simply sink from the storm. There may have been damage to her hull. Deliberate damage. Amara looked up, her tear-stained face suddenly alert. What are you saying? I'm saying grief can blind us to truths we might otherwise see, he replied carefully. I've noticed things about your friend Daphne. The way she watches you. The way she spoke of Elliot. I wonder if perhaps her heart harbored feelings she never expressed. That's impossible. Amara shook her head. Daphne has been my closest friend since we were children. She would never. Sometimes those closest to us keep their darkest thoughts hidden. Brother Matthias sighed. I may be wrong, but consider this. Why was she so quick to comfort you? Why does she visit this grave with you yet shows no real grief of her own? The seed of doubt planted, Amara began to notice things she had overlooked. Daphne's increasing suggestions that she should move forward, perhaps consider other suitors in the village. The small satisfaction in her eyes when Amara removed Elliot's ring, storing it away as too painful to wear. The slight smile when she spoke of how time heals all wounds. Yet without proof, Amara clung to the belief that her friend was simply trying to help her heal, never imagining that betrayal could wear such a familiar face. Shadows of return. 3 years passed with the steady rhythm of waves against shore. Yet time had not diminished Amara's devotion. Each dawn found her at Elliot's memorial stone, sometimes speaking to him of village happenings, sometimes simply sitting in contemplative silence, her auburn hair now longer, her face thinner. The vibrant girl had become a woman shaped by grief. The villagers called her the faithful widow, though she and Elliot had never married. Brother Matthias would watch her from the chapel window, his heart heavy with the weight of suspicions he could never fully prove. On this particular morning, mist clung to the cemetery stones, creating ghostly shapes among the markers. Amara knelt beside Elliot's stone, unwrapping a small package containing bread and honey. The first harvest of spring, she whispered, placing it before the stone. Remember how you always said nothing tasted sweeter than the first honey of the year. What she didn't see was the figure standing among the cypress trees at the cemetery's edge. A man with familiar eyes now hardened by experience, his dark hair longer, his once smooth face now bearing a scar along his jaw. Elliot Blackwood watched in silence, his heart constricting at the sight of Amara's continued devotion. He had survived that terrible night, though barely. The storm had indeed claimed the seafarer, but Elliot had been thrown clear, waking days later in a fishing village far down the coast with no memory of who he was or where he belonged. For 3 years he had lived among strangers working on their boats, slowly regaining fragments of his past, until finally the name Amara had surfaced, bringing with it a flood of memories that led him home. Now he stood watching, unwilling to reveal himself, until he understood what had happened that night. Rumors had reached him in the distant village. Stories of sabotage of a woman seen examining boats in the darkness. Something didn't fit, and Elliot needed answers before he stepped back into Amara's life. That afternoon he made his way to the harbor, keeping his face partially hidden beneath a worn cap. Few would recognize him now. The years at sea had weathered him, changed him from the young man who had left Meyerbrook with dreams of returning to marry his childhood love. "Strange to see you here," came a voice that made him freeze. "Most travelers don't find much interest in our humble docks." Elliot turned slowly to face Brother Matthias. The old man's eyes widened momentarily before he carefully composed his expression. "Perhaps we should speak somewhere more private," the brother suggested, leading Elliot to the small chapel without waiting for a response. Inside the stone walls, Brother Matthias closed the heavy wooden door before turning to study Elliot's face. "The dead return to us, it seems," he said finally, a slight smile crossing his weathered features, "though I always had my doubts about your demise." "What happened that night?" Elliot asked, removing his cap. "The seafarer was sound when we left harbor, yet she took on water faster than any storm damage could explain." Brother Matthias nodded gravely. "I've had my suspicions for years. Someone drilled a small hole just below the waterline, enough to doom the ship in rough waters. I believe I know who, though proving it has been impossible." "Daphne." Elliot said, the name falling from his lips like a stone. "She's changed since you disappeared," Brother Matthias explained. "Become Amara's constant companion, almost possessive. Some say she hopes to convince Amara to leave Meyerbrook with her start fresh elsewhere, away from memories and those who might question certain events." Elliot's jaw tightened. "And Amara, how has she been truly?" "Faithful beyond reason," the old man replied softly. "She speaks to your stone each day, shares her life with you, never once believing you might have abandoned her by choice. The village sees it as beautiful tragedy, but I've watched how it's kept her from truly living." That evening, Elliot followed Daphne as she left the village tavern. Her confident stride faltered slightly as she passed the path leading to the docks, almost as if the place itself accused her. He noticed how she glanced over her shoulder, frequently how her hand trembled as she reached for her cottage door. Inside his rented room at the village inn, Elliot sat by the window watching Amara's cottage in the distance. A single candle burned in her window, the same window where they had once exchanged secret signals as children. Tomorrow he would begin gathering evidence. Tomorrow he would find proof of what his heart already knew. Yet as dawn approached, Elliot found himself once more at the cemetery, hidden among the shadows, watching. As Amara arrived with fresh flowers, her voice carried to him on the morning breeze. "Another day without you," she whispered to the stone. "But I carry you with me always." In that moment, watching her fingers trace his name upon cold stone, Elliot realized that before confronting Daphne, before seeking justice, he needed to heal the heart that had grieved him for so long. Veils torn. Asunder, the morning fog clung to Meyerbrook like a shroud as Elliot made his way toward Daphne's cottage. His mind set his purpose clear. Finding her alone in her garden, he stepped from the shadows, causing her to drop the basket of herbs she'd been collecting. "No," she whispered, her face draining of color. "It can't be, you're dead." "Disappointed to see me alive, Daphne?" he asked, his voice carrying none of the warmth it once held. "Did you think the sea would keep your secrets forever?" She backed away, her hands trembling. I don't know what you're talking about. You're some stranger who resembles— Stop lying. Elliot cut her off, advancing slowly. I've spoken with the shipwright who found the hole in the seafarer's hull. I know someone. Drilled it deliberately. Someone who visited the docks the night before we sailed. Someone with honey blonde hair. Daphne's back hit the cottage wall, her eyes darting frantically, seeking escape. It was a terrible accident. The storm was convenient cover for murder. Elliot's voice remained measured, though rage simmered beneath. 4 men died, Daphne, 4 families destroyed, and for what? Because you couldn't bear to see Amara happy. Tears streaked down Daphne's face, though Elliot couldn't tell if they were born of remorse or fear. She didn't deserve you, she whispered finally. She never appreciated what she had. I would have loved you properly given the chance. You never had that right, a voice said from behind them. Both turned to find Amara standing at the garden gate, her face ashen, her hands clutching a small package wrapped in cloth. Brother Matthias stood beside her, his expression grim. I came to return your shawl. Amara said, her voice unnaturally steady. I never expected to find a ghost and a confession. The world seemed to still as Amara's eyes met Elliot's. 3 years of grief suspended between one heartbeat and the next. She took a single step forward, then another, her gaze never leaving his face, as if afraid he might vanish. Is it really you? She whispered, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his scarred cheek. Amara was all he could manage, her name catching in his throat. She collapsed against him, then her body shaking with sobs as his arms encircled her, pulling her close, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair. Brother Matthias discreetly moved to block Daphne's potential escape, though she made no attempt to flee, seeming to shrink against the cottage wall. How could you, Amara? Finally said, turning to face her former friend, her voice breaking. I trusted you, I mourned with you while you watched me suffer. Knowing what you'd done, Daphne slid down the wall to sit in the dirt, her carefully constructed world crumbling. I never meant for anyone to die, she whispered. Just damage enough to delay the journey. I thought with more time I could make him see that I was the better choice. The storm wasn't part of my plan. 4 men still dead by your hand. Brother Matthias said gravely, their blood cries out for justice. Later, as the village council gathered to hear the confession, Amara and Elliot stood apart near the cliffs, where they had once planned to build their home. His fingers interlaced with hers. Neither quite believing the reality of the other's presence. I should have come to you immediately, Elliot said, watching the sunset paint the sea golden. But I needed to understand what happened, needed proof before I disrupted your life again. You watched me at the grave. Amara realized suddenly. How many mornings did you stand in the shadows while I wept for you? Enough to know your heart never changed, he replied, bringing her hand to his lips. Enough to know mine hadn't either. That night after, Daphne had been taken to await the magistrate's arrival. They walked along the shore beneath a canopy of stars. Slowly they relearned each other. The changes time and trauma had wrought. Elliot's quiet strength had hardened into something more resolute, Amara's youthful exuberance tempered by grief into a deeper form of grace. When they reached the spot where he had once given her his grandmother's ring, Elliot stopped, pulling her gently into his arms. His lips found hers in a kiss that began tentatively, then deepened with the urgency of years lost. The warmth of her body against his, the softness of her mouth beneath his own, awakened something he had feared lost forever. I never stopped loving you, she whispered against his lips, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw. Even when they told me you were gone, I felt you somehow still connected to me. His hands moved to frame her face as he gazed into eyes that had haunted his dreams for 3 long years. Then perhaps some bonds cannot be broken, he said softly. Not by storms or treachery or even death itself. Under the witness of stars and sea, they began to rebuild what betrayal had sought to destroy, their entwined shadows, stretching across the sand as if unwilling to ever be parted again. Beyond the grave, winter gave way to spring as healing slowly took root in Meyerbrook. The magistrate had come and gone. Daphne sent to the mainland prison for her crimes, leaving the village to mend the tears in its fabric. Whispers followed Elliot, and Amara wherever they went. The tale of death defied and love preserved, becoming something of a legend along the coast. On this particular morning, they stood together before the empty grave that had borne Elliot's name for 3 years. Amara placed a bouquet of wildflowers upon the stone, not in mourning but in remembrance. Strange to visit your own grave. Elliot mused, his arm around her waist. Stranger still to think of how long you sat here speaking to a ghost. Not a ghost, Amara corrected, leaning against him. A promise I wasn't ready to surrender. Brother Matthias approached them, his robes billowing in the spring breeze. The stonemason asks what you'd like done with this, he said, gesturing to the memorial. It seems rather peculiar. To keep a marker for a man very much alive. Elliot considered the stone for a moment. Let it remain, but change the inscription. Perhaps, here lies what was lost but found again. Something to remind us that even death can sometimes be defeated. The old priest smiled. Poetic. A fitting tribute to your journey. As Brother Matthias departed, Elliot turned to Amara, taking both her hands in his. I've something to ask you, he said, his voice carrying a hint of nervousness unusual for him. The cottage on the cliffs is nearly finished, the one we dreamed of since childhood. Amara's eyes brightened. You've been building it all this time. Every day since my return, he nodded. But a home needs more than walls and a roof. It needs promises kept. From his pocket, he withdrew a familiar silver ring, the pearl catching the morning light. I believe you once accepted this, though perhaps we should consider it a new beginning rather than merely resuming what was interrupted. Tears gathered in Amara's eyes as she extended her hand, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. Some things need no new beginning, she whispered. They simply continue unbroken. Their wedding took place as summer approached. The entire village gathered to witness. Vows exchanged on the cliffside beside their new cottage. Brother Matthias performing the ceremony with a joy that seemed to illuminate his weathered features. Amara wore wildflowers in her hair, the same varieties she had once placed upon an empty grave. Elliot stood tall and proud, the scar on his jaw catching the sunlight, a permanent reminder of all they had overcome. That evening, as celebrations continued in the village square, they slipped away to their cottage. The last golden rays of sunset streamed through open windows as Elliot closed the door behind them. Finally alone, wife. He whispered the word new and precious on his tongue. Husband, she replied, her smile radiant as she moved into his arms. Their kiss deepened with urgency, years of separation fueling a hunger neither could contain. His hands trembled slightly as they unlaced her dress, revealing skin pale as moonlight beneath. The garment fell away forgotten as his lips traced a path along her throat, his fingers exploring the soft curves of her body with reverent wonder. Her own hands worked to free him from his shirt, revealing the scars the sea had left upon him. Battle wounds from his fight to return to her. She traced each mark with tender fingers, then with gentle lips as if to heal what had been broken. They moved to the bed they had crafted together, falling upon it in a tangle of limbs and whispered promises. His mouth claimed hers again and again as their bodies joined in the ancient dance of lovers reunited. Her sighs became his breath, her pleasure, his purpose as they moved together, building toward something that transcended the physical union. Afterward, as they lay entwined, watching stars appear through the open window, Elliot traced lazy patterns along the curve of her spine. I used to dream of this, he murmured against her hair, during those years away. Even before I remembered your name, I remembered this feeling of coming home. Amara propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the fading light. What happens now? She asked. After betrayal, after grief, after finding each other again. How do we simply live ordinary days? With gratitude, he replied, pulling her close. Each sunrise a gift, each moment together precious, because we know too well the cost of loss. Seasons turned as they built their life together. The cottage on the cliffs became known for its warmth, for the laughter that echoed from its walls. Children eventually came bringing new joy, new purpose. Elliot taught them to sail safely, respect the sea without fearing it. Amara showed them how to find beauty in small moments, to cherish connections that transcend understanding. Once each year on the anniversary of the storm, they would visit the stone that still stood in the cemetery. It remained not as a marker of death, but as testament to devotion that had transcended separation. Brother Matthias would often join them, growing older, yet still watching over the village with his quiet wisdom. Some say true love is proven in grand gestures, the old priest remarked on one such visit. But I've come to believe it's found in faithful waiting and refusing to surrender hope when all evidence suggests otherwise. Amara smiled, watching their children place flowers on the stone, though they were too young to fully understand its significance. Perhaps it's both, she suggested, the courage to fight your way back across impossible distances and the faith to keep a candle burning in the window. Elliot's arm tightened around her waist as they stood together, bathed in afternoon sunlight. The grave couldn't hold what was meant to live, he said softly. Neither death nor betrayal nor years apart. Nothing could truly separate what belonged together as... They turned to leave. Amara cast one final glance at the memorial stone. The inscription caught the light. Here lies what was lost, but found again. Words that had become not just their story, but their legacy. A reminder that some bonds transcend, even death's seeming finality. Together they walked away from the empty grave toward the fullness of the life they had reclaimed, hand in hand against the backdrop of sea and sky, their shadows stretching behind them, united as they always were meant to be.